everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jacques, this is SSBB Builds, and this is my 96 BMW E36 328i, which we've now converted into a full-on race car. And we've got some cool objectives for the car. We've got a big event coming up, and stick around for all of the information on that. We've got a lot of challenges. We might make it, we might not. But the goal of this episode is really to get the thing buttoned up and running, and then obviously to the dyno. There's been a lot happening, and I haven't been able to film everything because of just the massive push and everything we've been trying to get done, everything we've been doing to get it done, or something like that. And let's jump straight into it. Okay, so the first part of this video is going to be the suspension. I recorded this footage back in August when we were pushing really hard to get the thing done, way back before we put the engine in. We had a lot of snags obviously, but first order of business was to get the front suspension in and then the rear suspension. And then after that there's a whole bunch of random goodies that needed to happen. Alright, so what feels like an eternity, a year, we have managed to receive the dampers back after the bottom end being incorrect. So they have now been correctly made, and we're about to do the assembly. So that's what we're kind of doing today. So we've got to pull out the old spindle knuckle upright thing and dust them off. And let's get to it. As mentioned last time, there is a left and a right side to these. So this is the right hand side being, if you're sitting in the car, that's the right facing front obviously, that's the left, so this will be the right side. So what I'm going to do is just put some copper compound on this section of the bolt, the shank, so that it doesn't corrode. We want to take it off at any time, and then we'll put Loctite on the actual thread. Yes, it fits. Yes! That was a stressful moment. Just a little bit of Loctite. Don't need a ton of Loctite, because this is also a form of a lock nut. So it's not 100% tight. Again, just a bit of Loctite. Okay, now I need the cameraman's help to tighten this. Click! There we go. We're going to put the springs on. First, the locking nut goes on. You hold the shaft while I spin the nuts. Then the spring goes on. Then the camber adjuster goes on, and then the locking nuts. So that is pretty much ready to go in the car. Alright, so what I've done is I've put the subframe in and the steering rack. Pretty much it's kind of temporarily because we need to drop the subframe when we put the engine and gearbox back in. But the reason I put that in is because I want to put that strut and that upright in. So I've got these plates I got from Beamer World in the US, and funny enough I bought a lot of stuff from them simply because we don't get the stuff here. This is from an M3. It's a genuine BMW part, and this goes inside the shock tower like this, and it is there to strengthen this area. And an interesting story is that the E36 chassis was the first chassis that BMW used CAD to design the actual chassis. So this was obviously made in the early 90s, and then CAD was very revolutionary around that time. And the approach was that they used the CAD software to basically try and thin out the design and trim back as much material while keeping the structure strong. So which was perfect for road car applications, but as soon as you start adding grip and increased spring rates and that, and stiffening the chassis, it changes things. So what people found is that cracking would develop in specific areas around the chassis. That's why we reinforced the back with subframe bolts to the chassis, because same thing, eventually you're applying so much more load and torque to the chassis, eventually you get something called material fatigue. And that's basically if you were to take a very thin piece of metal and you would bend it the one way and bend it the other way, and if you keep doing that, what will happen is it'll get to a point where the material fatigues, the molecules break apart basically, and the thing will break. And that's what happens with, you basically get loading that does this to the material. So we've stiffened it there. We're going to use this, which is an OEM product, and this they use on the M3 version. So we're going to bolt that in. We want the part number for this. Get it from Beamer World. I'll leave a link in the description below. Might have to get longer bolts here. My man, you don't jiggle jiggle. Come on, get in there. Oh, look at that. Woo! Wow, wow, wee wah. Okay, let me insert the damper. That's the damper, Hans. Oh yes, that is a tight fit. What are you doing? So I put the camber plate in the wrong way. I've given it positive camber. That's obviously not what we want. This is what happens. Try not to do things twice. It'll save you a lot of time. Alright, so we have new control arms we're going to put in now. Control arm goes in like that, and then I also have the caster bushes. These are aluminium. We're going to run the aluminium ones. Control arm is in temporarily because again we're going to have to drop the subframe, but we can put all of this on. And I want to get the wheel studs in. So this is the socket I had to special order. Nip it up like that. When the car's on its wheels on the ground, we'll finally tighten it. We are onto the wheel studs. We're going to use the red Loctite bearing mount stuff. I'm going to put some copper slip on this bolt that holds the disc in, because these have a tendency of seizing. Look at that. Woo! Much easier with the wheel studs and batting the wheel nut. So as I mentioned before, big thank you to Ben from Superior Friction for supplying us these amazing Brembo discs. Then it was time to move on to the rear suspension. We battled quite a bit with the press trying to find the right setup and configuration to get the rear control arm in. But eventually we got it sorted and managed to press out the old bearings. Alright, so we've just spent a lot of time running through all the stuff. Took these off, took the old bearings out. You can see the bearings, these are the wheel bearings. Very, very second hand. This is the old bush, the other one disintegrated when we took it apart, so this goes at the top of the upright. Here's one of the new ones. So got from Beamer World. Now this is the new hub that we'll be using. and these were the bearings that I ordered. They're not the right bearings. I don't know where they come from, what they're from, but they're not as wide in terms of diameter as these bearings. So this doesn't work. And I bought those a very long time ago, so I don't think I'll be able to replace that. We can't go ahead and finish this like I wanted to. So what we're going to do in the meantime, we're going to paint it all up. And then I'll have to go in the week to a different supplier, go get new bearings. In the meantime, I'm going to button up a lot of the ancillaries on the engine and get a lot of other small things done so that we can basically put the front end on and the radiator in and do as much as we can. Something I need to do is we need to still fit the water pump. There's some sensors that need to go in there. We need to fit this gasket. Managed to get the right gasket now. What else? There's crank sensor, this whole alternator bracket, the oil pump lines, all of that, the oil filter. So all that needs to go in. Pretty much throttle body can go on. This intake can go, it's going to go on temporarily because the wiring guy might want to take it on and off. The starter motor can go in, you can see it's not in there. And then once we're done with all of that, we can put the front on. Right, so we put the oil filter housing, which is also the alternator bracket, on. We put the starter in. I'm now going to finalize the valve cover gasket because we finally have the right gasket. Because of the oil cooler lines, we're going to run the alternator cooling system now is fouling with the oil cooler fittings. So Johannes is just clearancing that. So you only put a little bit in the corners. That is all. So that should work nicely. Alright, so a lot of these grommets are broken. So I never got new grommets in the gasket set, so that is something I'll have to order from BMW. What a freaking day it's been. It's been an absolutely mental day. We've worked so hard to get the back end done on this car. We got a lot done. We had a lot of hiccups, and it's amazing. It still amazes me how many tiny little snags we're having, but we managed to get so much done. The car's on its wheels. The brakes are not hooked up yet. It is super low on the front. I need to get the front ride height sorted because the front and rear is not exactly level. It's got a bit of rake on it. I like the ride height on the front, but I don't think we're going to get the back this low, so we'll have to just jack it up a bit on the front. So I had a lot of issues today with the front end of this car. It was fairly straightforward getting the front end on, but the radiator is not fitting, and I had the stock radiator modified to take aluminium tanks, but that's not working out because the guy that did the modification didn't make it exactly the same, so now the radiator sits a bit too high. Why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because the clips do not fit, and I want to use the stock clips just in case we have an issue with the radiator, and we can just put a stock radiator back in. the reason we went for an aluminium radiator is just the additional cooling. I didn't want to go for a massive fancy radiator that's going to take a lot of fab work, so I want to try and get away with this standard architecture. So there is still a ton to do on the engine. I'm waiting for some machined bushes because the M3 oil filter housing doesn't fit the standard Vanos fittings, and yeah, it's just so many little things like that. So the radiator is holding us up. That reducer for the oil filter, for the oil feed line for the Vanos, waiting for that. This is where the airflow sensor goes, and we're not obviously going to use that, so I need to get a piece of pipe that's going to fill that void. Alternatively, I could just find an old broken sensor somewhere. That's also an option. The one that was in this car was working. I did a trade with it as part of the paint deal. The water bottle we're mounting here, so I'm having that fabricated up. So there's a fancy bracket that's getting manufactured. The breather bottle is going to go there, so there's a breather line that's going to come from the valve cover all the way over there. We've spoken about this, and yeah man, so once the radiator is fixed, the other thing we've got to sort out are oil cooler lines. So the reason we went for an aluminium an M3 filter housing, which is part of this, is so that we can run the oil cooler lines out here. So then we have to have, I'm going to have an oil cooler bracket manufactured. So the guy that's doing a lot of the fabrication work on there is helping me with this car. I just do not have the time to do it myself. So there's also small things, because we've gone to the M50 intake manifold. The 328 has smaller diameter runners, and so it actually chokes the engine quite a bit. These have got much larger runners, so these make more power, so we've gone to that. But then you get all sorts of challenges again, so we've had to make a sandwich plate for the throttle body to fit this manifold, but that is done, and then we've got to now figure out a way to secure the dipstick. And so we go, so many little things. But anyway, the rear end is in, so that means that the car is potentially, well, it can move around. We still need to sort the brakes out. We didn't get to the brakes, but I just wanted to make sure that everything was good. We've got to connect the steering up to the steering wheel, bolt the steering in. So like I said, a mountain of little jobs to do. So we're going to make a list. We first need to get this thing out, because this thing's been giving us a lot of uphill. But yeah, we're gonna make a list, get stuck into this. So from there, we had to work to button up a lot of the issues I just spoke about, and really it was a massive push. Again, so much work was done off camera, but the big thing was getting the wiring done, getting the radiator in and sorted. So why were we pushing so hard? Well, the plan was for a long time to do the Killarney 9-hour endurance race on the 9th of December 2022, and that was the big goal. And because of all of the delays I had with so many things, suppliers, manufacturing, component failures, etc., we were really up against the wall with this one. I was going to do the 9-hour with a friend of mine who I studied with, and we've been friends ever since. Our friendship goes back way back to 2002, I think, perhaps even earlier, 2000, the year 2000, I think. And him and I did endurance bike racing at Killarney in Cape Town. So we made it was a goal for us to do this race, and then Paolo Collinson from 5-Star Racing from Mozambique was going to join us. And so the big push was to get the car ready so we could do some testing and eventually do the race. And that's what we were pushing so hard. So I've combined a few episodes into this one episode just because of the nature of the footage. So we're going to finish the wiring, then get this puppy started, and then the plan is to head to the dyno. in preparation for the wiring, I had to finish a lot of small tasks. That was mounting the oil cooler, because I received a manufactured oil cooler mounting bracket, and installing the water bottle also from a manufactured mounting bracket. I had them custom manufactured. Then we had to install the steering wheel and install the fan onto the radiator. Beautiful. Once I had the fan position, I could then start with routing the oil cooler lines and getting the orientation of the fittings correct. I'm having a challenge here with the radiator hose. We're going to want to use the standard radiator hose, obviously, just so that if there's an incident, we can replace the radiator with the stock one, and stock hoses. So we need to route the lines around the hose. These are the two fittings for the oil cooler lines. One is in, one is out, one is in. And so what I think, because this radiator line hose is right in the way, I suspect we're also going to have a fan here. So I suspect the bottom one is going to have to go under the hose, which can work. And this top one will have to go over the hose, which can also work, so it shouldn't be a major issue. You can still replace this radiator hose if you need to. It's not going to be a train smash. So I'm going to measure up these lines and then we can get to cutting. We've got the oil cooler mounted with the fittings in, so we are all ready to go. Something else that had to be done was fixing the rear windscreen, using a special windscreen bond to fix the rear windscreen in. The car also went for its exhaust, came back, and then we were able to carry on. We then moved on to installing the surge tank for the fuel system. Alright, so I can't get rubber mounts, so I'm using a bit of hose and a cap screw. Cap screw goes through. Hose sits on the bottom, and then underneath the car we will have big washer M8 nylock nut. So I had already given the wiring technician the go-ahead to start with the wiring loom, which he did. He made it all on his bench at his workshop and just came in and pretty much pulled the cables. There was a lot of small little things to do, but he knocked it out the park pretty much over one day. From there we could tie in all the loose ends, run the chassis harness, and then get ready to fire her up. I topped it up with oil and it was ready to try firing her up. Alright, so now it was pretty much time to fire this puppy up. So Aubrey, the guy that did the wiring, very well versed with these ECU master systems, and we're running the ECU master black in this car. So he knows them very well, and between him and I we set the parameters of all the engines. So the injector size, the coil types, etc., the firing order, we went about trying to just get a baseline and get this thing started. First off, we cranked for oil pressure. This is a basic for any new engine build, and it took a while to get the oil pressure, but in the end we did. We also had to fiddle with the sensors to make sure that we were getting the right feedback. Luckily I've got one mechanical sensor that's feeding the dash, and then one sensor a pressure and a temperature sensor feeding the ECU. Go! Well, there you go. Unfortunately, we could not get it started. No matter what we did, I just don't have enough experience with these systems. I've never worked or programmed a startup on any of the ECU master systems, so I don't know. So what I did is I called Mike and Lyle Ramsey from the BMW Club. They had just gone through the build of a turbo one of these, and they ran a normally aspirated version for a long time. They also ran it with the ECU Masters Classic and also the ECU Masters Black, so they'd done the transition between the two. Mike is extremely technical and very knowledgeable. He is a systems engineer from what I understand, basically an ECNI engineer. I must say a big thank you to Mike and Lyle Ramsey, because we put in a lot of hours, and it took us 2 nights to get this thing started. So here's that story. You ready?
Show me Lalipi.
Did you reactivate the fuel pump?
Yes.
Because I don't hear it.
You don't hear it. It's the relay checking.
Yeah, I can feel it in the back here. There's 2 pumps, so I'll have to hold them both.
Okay, wait a second.
There's 3 pumps.
3 pumps.
There's 2 lift pumps and the high pressure pump in the back. So you should hear the high pressure pump. Here we go. Did you increase the...
I just increased the duty cycle.
I can feel the jolt.
Yeah. No, it should be good. Okay, good.
Alright. I nearly fired once or twice.
Ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. What have you set the injector size at?
240s.
So it should be close enough.
Yeah. What are they?
It's 235 or something. That's what I can Google.
Let's just have a look at the plugs if they're wet.
Yeah, just remember we can't run it for long because there's no water.
You buy new ones here.
Yeah.
New or new?
There. How about them?
It's fucking moving.
Jesus. Anyway, let's move on.
We're close. We're so close. More. Leave the battery on charge.
We'll leave it overnight.
Are you making boost?
Okay.
Stop.
Yeah, who's got the throttle?
I got it.
The fuel pump's starting.
Yes.
Wanted to earlier.
Alright.
Come on, old Beamer. 26 years. took us about 30 start tries to get the thing started, but eventually we got it sorted and we got it running. And again, massive thank you to Mike and Lyle Ramsey for all your time and effort and input into this build. Alright, so the other night we managed to get this puppy started and it took us a really long time, but now what we have to do is we need to prep this car for the dyno. So there's a lot of little things we're going to do. What I'm going to do now is I've got some Festo hose. I'm going to use this is pneumatic hose. I'm going to use this piece in between the brake booster and the intake manifold, the vacuum line, because the standard steel line that the car came with just doesn't fit because of the bars. So we're going to do this, and we've got a couple of other things we need to do. We also have to do a setup, just a basic setup to make sure that the wheels are pointing in forward at least, so that the car doesn't move around on the dyno. After that we have to drain the oil, but I think today we're just going to get some of the small stuff done, the breather system, this hose, and do the setup. This through here. I'm going to try to press it in here. Oh, this is where it becomes difficult. So as you can see, we've gone black on the kidney grills. I really like this look, so let's see what it looks like. This is one of the last things I wanted to get done, but okay. So that goes in like that. Oh man, wow, wee wah. Wow, that looks so good. We'll have to get it out into the sun to really see, but that looks magnificent. We also have the bumper strips here which have been painted black, but we're not going to put those on now because there's some adjustment that needs to happen on the bumper. I love that OEM look. We've put the grille on now and we're going for such a clean OEM look, and I love the group end vibe we're kind of going for. We've got that flexi hose in there. It's not black, it doesn't matter. We put this breather in here. We've just put the airbox in, and I've used the distance piece to take up that gap. Maybe in Cape Town we can find a used airflow sensor. What I'm going to do now is tighten up these nuts. And then we're going to put in the air filter. But like I said, I've gone to great lengths to keep the stock airbox, and I think it's looking magnificent. There we go, so now we put the air filter in. I've got a high flow air filter for us. So we will be using this. Why not a cone filter, you might ask? Well, it's really about the OEM look for this car. I don't think you're going to pick up that much more power, if any. So for me it's more about the look, the OEM vibe. What I also did is I removed the cone. There was a restrictor cone inside the airbox. I've removed that. So the M3 E36 M3 ran this airbox. So we've taken out the mass airflow sensor, that was a restriction. We've taken out the cone, that was a restriction. I really don't think we're going to have issues with this setup, but let's see. Even if it does suck a couple of horsepower, it's okay, I'm fine with it. Because for me, it's about the practicality of it and the OEM look. And this beautiful cartridge system that BMW developed. So the trick with these filters is you have to clean them after every single race. Every time you drive them, you must clean them. They are worth maybe a horsepower, 1 kilowatt, 1 newton kind of thing, but there we go. Drops in like that. Wait. Feels a bit tight. There we go. It's gonna be tough to get it out. Okay, we'll leave it like that. Bada bing, bada boom. Look at that. We've got a makeshift breather bottle here. Used an old Motul oil can. I love it. I love it. Alright, so I've come so far with this car, and what we need to do is we're going to get it ready for the dyno this coming week. So I need to do a basic setup to make sure that the wheels are pointing in the right direction, and I'm just going to do a couple of things. Take off the protection film on the windows and pretty much get her ready. So I'm going to get stuck into that. So I was on track, we were pounding away, managed to get some really good traction, and from here what was left to do before the dyno was drain the oil, drain the run-in oil, and basically that's the startup oil. It contains the assembly lube and any sort of particles from the first bedding in process of the rings and any other contaminants that there might be in the oil. So the objective is you use that oil just to get it started, get it through a few heat cycles. You then drain it and then put in a decent oil for when it goes to the dyno, when you initially tune the car. If it's an engine where it already has a tune, you could run a not such a high quality oil to allow the rings to bed in quicker. But ultimately with these engines you want to run a very good quality oil and a high viscosity oil, especially with the heat loads that we have here in South Africa. So unfortunately this is where the wheels came off, so to speak, and where I found a major problem. Alright, so it is the day before the dyno. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the oil, put some new oil in. These motors like 20 or 10 to 20 W60, especially needs to be quite thick when it's hot. So we'll do that and then we're going to load it. Okay. So from here everything looked fine. I pulled the oil out of the sump, had a look at it, put it in the tray, drained it out, and all looked fine. From there I took out the cartridge, the oil filter cartridge out of the oil filter housing, and this is when I noticed something. This was the first oil drain after we haven't even dynoed it yet. Basically it ran start off. So this is obviously coming out the filter. I didn't really see anything in the oil apart from the normal stuff, but so there's no chunks or anything, it's just I picked up small particles inside the filter housing itself and inside the oil that was in the filter. So I gave a good friend of mine, Robert, a call. Now Rob is from Cancel Racing Engines. There's a link to a video I did at his workshop back in 2020 I think, and basically he's a professional engine builder. I sent him the videos and I asked him his opinion. The particles were not big, like when you run a bearing in a motor, the particles are quite big. These particles were not big in that sense, but they were big enough to catch my attention. Now, based on my experience, you shouldn't really have particle sizes that big. You do get something called machine wash, which is effectively any machine filings from the machining process, either in the cylinder head or in the block, that could be left in galleries, and sometimes that gets stuck and then it washes out when you get oil pressure and oil temperature up, and then it gets caught in the filter. That is sometimes does happen. However, this seemed like it was a bit more in terms of its quantity. So what I did was, Robert didn't get back to me, he was obviously busy. So what I did is I put the fresh oil in. Unfortunately, it was a lot of money worth of oil, and I decided, well, the show must go on, we're pushing for a deadline. I didn't feel like it was too much of a big issue. I went against my instinct and I decided to put the fresh oil in and load the car. While I had the car on the trailer and I was busy tying it up, Robert phoned me and he said, stop the bus, this is a problem. That is not normal. That is not normal. You should not actually take it to the dyno because it's just too much of a risk. So I was also still humming and hawing, saying, well, I don't know, you know. There were a few signs of things. The cylinder head was very noisy, but that could just be the lifters were slightly worn, because I did use the original lifters based on advice from the refurbishment company. What Robert said I must do, take the car for a drive. If the map was okay, if the fuel map and the ignition map was okay, that I could drive the car. He said just apply load to the motor in moderation, and as you come off, if it's a bearing knock, you'll be able to hear the knock. So you apply the load and come off, or come off gradually, and you might be able to hear the knock and the deceleration. I couldn't hear anything because the engine noise coming through was too loud. After I put the new oil in, I took the car for a drive, came back. I still wasn't certain, so I pulled the car up here and I took the cartridge out of the housing, and that's when I saw there was even more in terms of particles. So by this time the car had done a massive heat cycle, all the temperatures were fine, but ultimately the particles were still there after I changed the filter and the oil. And so that was a massive red flag. So what does that mean for us? Well, that means that I decided to cancel the event. At this stage, it was pretty much the week before the week I had to drive down. So I was scheduled to drive down to Cape Town on the 5th of December, and I just couldn't. There wasn't enough time to take the engine out, strip it, figure out what was going on, then do any sort of repairs that potentially could be there. There just was not enough time, and unfortunately, because of the delays, we just ran out of time. And so from a massive mechanical failure like this, we just ran out of resources, ran out of time. So we decided to caution is the better part of valor, and we decided to call it and cancel the event, which is really unfortunate because so much of the team, we already had a team formulated, massive plan. It just didn't come to plan. But it's okay, we have to be safe and cautious sometimes, especially with these things. So much money has gone into this car, and so it was better that if there was a mechanical problem, which there was, we rather save the motor, don't try and be a hero and rush it, because ultimately you will cause more harm and potentially destroy the engine. So it could be a few things. I haven't stripped it as yet. Reason being, I'm going to be moving soon, moving premises, and so I don't want the engine in 1,000 pieces in between a move and everything going on. So I just have decided to just hold on the strip. So what could it be? It could be when we sleeved the block, that the block has warped, either bananaed over its length, or torqued or twisted in such a way that as it heats up over 1,000th of a millimeter, it almost goes out of its straightness, and therefore the crank picks up on one of the bearings. Now when I had the machining done at the machine shop, they said that the crank didn't need to be line bored, it was fine, everything was straight. So that is a potential. The other is that there could be an issue with one of the clearances on the piston rings, and one of the piston rings is catching. It could be that there's something catching on the timing chain. I mean, we didn't feel anything while, you know, the whole thing rotated freely. So it really is a bit of a mystery. It could be that the oil pump is somehow catching and wearing itself to pieces. So it could be a number of things, and the only way you could really find out is by stripping the engine and going through it to figure out what is actually going on. So like I said, at this stage of the game, there's not much we can do now except strip it and figure it out, and then fix it. So at this point, I want to give a massive shout out to Sean Gradwell from KWT Motor Engineering in PE. They've been a massive help during this whole build process, and he's offered to assist with the repairs on this motor. So whatever the issue is, I'm going to be consulting him, and we're going to look at trying to get this thing sorted. So we're going to tackle that in the new year, once I've moved premises and everything is kind of stabilized. But anyway, I want to say thank you to everybody who supported me on this build and during this journey, and we're going to have some amazing times with this car. We just have to cross a few of the hurdles. In the meantime, we're going to sort out a lot of the small things, take our time with things, and just try and get it right. So if you're still watching, thank you so much, and thank you so much for your support during this whole build series. From here I'm going to carry on with some front wheel drive content, and we'll come back to the BMW as soon as we can. We've still got a lot to do on this thing. We've got to do the branding, still have to do the dyno once we've sorted the engine out and all that good stuff. But we'll tackle the engine on a new video series, and yeah, we'll take it from there. So once again, thank you so much for watching and supporting us, and if you like this, please like and turn on the bell notification thing, and hopefully we can get some more good content coming. I've got some amazing stuff planned for 2023. I hope we can make it realize, and I just hope we can continue this journey. So anyway, thank you guys so much, and hopefully we can get this puppy on the track soon. We'll see you next time. Ciao.